Curtains have opened up the auditorium to usher the performance of Pabulum. Spotlight shines overhead. Director raises their thumb. If everybody's comfortable, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you for waiting to now unwind. Feast your imagination on what you find. What will you find? Past Pabulum. Past Pabulum. Past Pabulum. Past Pabulum. Past Pabulum. Yeah. This podcast pure picking up steam now. A little steamy podcast. I'm pretty ambivalent about this week's episode. I'm not sure whether we should cover it in cement and drop it in the North Sea, never to be heard of again, or if it's a work of genius. And that ambivalence comes from it being an incredibly serpentine episode, incredibly labyrinthine. Yo, where are my minotaurs at? Where are my minotaurs? Theseus, come at me, bro. Like, it is a very labyrinthine episode. So I had a lot of things to express, and I'm not quite sure I expressed them. And really what it all comes down to is at the beginning of the week, I had the ambition... toe cramp. I had the ambition... fuck your mother. I had the ambition that I was going to reform the education system of my nation. And believe it or not, I failed. I figured out it's probably not possible. And the reason this came about was I bought a book called Emile by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and I was thinking it was going to be a book on education reform. It's more a book on child development, actually, and if you did a lot of the things that he describes to do, prescribes to do, I think it would fuck up the child massively. I think it's a bad idea, a lot of it. But there's a lot of good ideas too. He raised some points, who should be taught, who's the ideal teacher, what's the ideal size of a class. So these are the kind of things that I explore, and I end up agreeing with a lot of things, and I come to the conclusion, well, there were a lot of blockades to having a national reform. As I say, I only got a week, and it's a lot to kind of get through. So I'm not sure I actually make any of those points. it's still an entertaining episode. If you want to just like and subscribe and buy a fucking book pieces here, if you want to do all that now, feel free. But I think I'm honestly just unsure if I ever get to make the points I wanted to make. The real blockades towards having education reform within our country it's a propaganda wing for the government. It sees itself as a charity, it sees itself as a daycare centre, and it sees itself, it's just classism. I think those are the four major blockades. If you solve those, I think we can have a national reform. So this episode is just more like a critique on the education system, and come to the realisation that I wasn't able to reform it fully, and coming to the conclusion that it must be an academy going forward, and all throughout these next episodes. And I was disappointed with that, because I really wanted to make 3 episodes: primary education, secondary education, tertiary education. But now I've got to make this one just to express those points that may or may not be expressed. Like I said, it's too long. I can't listen back to it, but it's like, it is what it is. And do be aware that everything you're about to listen to may well just be the right.
sons of madmen.
So let us begin by asking, what is the ideal teacher? For most of us, this is a mythological figure because, to put it gently, many teachers in this country are subpar. And some of them are fucking characters. There's one teacher in my school called Mr. Wildman. I'm honestly not even sure he was a real teacher. I think there might have been a real teacher called Mr. Wildman, and this lunatic just kidnapped him and stole his identity, started using the school to house his exotic animals. Anyway, this imposter would bring tarantulas into assembly, and he kind of looked like a spider too, actually. He had his black, slicked back hair, a spindly physique, would hide in women's bathtubs. He actually looked like Peter Parker if they'd been bitten by a radioactive Peter Parker. But he didn't have glasses, just these blinkless Ted Bundy eyes. And he'd bring a huge tarantula into the school assembly, this Shelob-looking cunt. And he just paraded around to all these rows of screaming school children. And then he'd say, hey, is anyone scared of spiders? And I was, but I had the wisdom to keep stum. But if any kids said they were scared of spiders, he'd start putting the tarantula right into their face. And this horrible hairy motherfucker just started flicking its knee pubes at people. And he started going, shield your eyes, everyone, because if the knee pube gets in your eye, you'll go blind. It's like, hey, psycho, leave it at home. Better yet, leave it in the Amazon. This creature was not designed for these climes. So such beasts were banished from this island long ago. So send it back. I honestly don't think he was a real teacher. You just come into the classes sometimes, stop putting like snakes around your neck and shit. There are 1,000 other fucking bizarre teachers I could tell you about. We could do an entire episode on them, multiple episodes. Teachers that had affairs with students, all kind of wackiness. But there's a few that spring to mind. And another teacher in the year 7 geography, set 1 geography. So that's the highest level class. I mean, not to brag, I was in every other class I was retarded, but we'll get to it. And one day he was trying to be cool and said, "Hey everyone, I'm psychic. Do you want me to show you that I'm psychic?" And no one cares. I was like, "You're fucking whatever, faggot." And he goes, "Well, okay. Here's a sum you need to do." And he made us add some numbers together, then like divide and subtract, and eventually he said that. So if 1 is A and 2 is B, so on throughout the alphabet, whatever number you're thinking of, have the letter for that. Goes, does everybody have it? And the number was 4, so the letter we had was D. Then he said, now think of a country beginning with that letter. I had this huge smile across his face. I can't express how impressed with himself he was, and said, "Are you ready? Are you ready?" Denmark. And I went, nah. and already he couldn't hack it, so he started to go, "Yes, it is." I said, "It fucking isn't." And he said, It must be. Tell me your answer then. You're fucking lying." And then I hit him with a big fat Djibouti. He had no clue who he had in his midst. I just laid on a big Djibouti. And I swear down, he started going, "That's not a real country. You just made that up." I said, "Give me a fucking map, and while we're here, bitch, Dominican Republic." And I ended up getting moved down class. Another time in year 8 history, a teacher called Mr. Healy, when we were learning World War II propaganda, learning about Hitler. There was a picture in a textbook of Hitler dead, right? And I put my hand up and said, "Hey, that's not Hitler," which caused a few chuckles in the class, and just like set him off. And he goes, don't be so anti-Semitic. Right, and then again, I moved down in that class too, but this just like niggled me. It stuck with me. So a few years later, when I was about 16, did a quick Google search. The picture isn't Hitler. It's a man called Gustav Weiler. There's no picture of Hitler being dead anywhere. Look at those fucking ears. The eyes. Barely even a chaplain stash. This is why there are loads of conspiracies about Hitler escaping to South America or Antarctica or whatever, because there's no photographic evidence of Hitler being dead. But the Soviets released a bunch of pictures like that in like a program of disinformation. And then decades later, they released a skull. But then even that was forensically tested and found to belong to a 20-year-old woman. So it couldn't have even been Eva Braun. But basically the story goes that after seeing the images of what happened to Mussolini, old Musmas, immediately after killing himself, the Nazis were like, yeah, fucking get rid. Just got rid of his body, so there's no evidence that remains. Certainly not a picture. So I was fucking right. You know, scandalous. Another cognitive teacher I had was an English teacher in year 7. And I sagged the first few weeks of year 7, so I did get put in like the lowest subjects for most things, as I say, because I missed the tests. And this didn't really change until we had tests at the end of year 9. As I'll go into all that nonsense later. Anyway, I had this teacher called Miss Davies, and she taught my oldest brother in the past, who was a bit of a troublemaker. And every term the teachers could move someone up to a higher set. But on my first day in being in this retard class, she said, well, I can see you're not supposed to be here, but I'm going to keep you here and never move you up because I taught your oldest brother, so I don't trust you. And I think I need to keep a very close eye on you. You know, if I was from Okinawa and this was a porn film, I would have raped her right there and then, filmed the entire thing, blackmailed her, bought a bondage kit, strangled her tits with some rope and introduced her to people at parties as my cow. You know what I mean? Fucking outrageous. So I shouldn't have been in this class, and I was kept there anyway out of pure vaginal vengeance. The vaginal mind strikes again. You may notice this is a common complaint of mine. This is the age of Kali Yuga after all. But anyone hear me say this often? The penile mind can go fuck itself too. In this instance, I think that's what the ego of the previous teachers can be attributed to. In fact, let's go through all of them to deduce what qualities you shouldn't have if you're going to be a teacher. To get to what you should have. The first teacher was egotistical. This is a problem because truth has no concern for who you think you are or what the world is. The truth is going to be the truth irregardless of those things. And your duty as a teacher is to impart truth onto the children. Well, ideally, but as we'll get to, that's clearly not the case in our schools right now. Clearly, there are also propaganda wings of the government, amongst other things we'll get to. The second teacher was just stupid, discouraging questioning, which is a problem because the entirety of novel knowledge being discovered is predicated upon us being questioning and inquisitive. And so if our intention is to create geniuses, which also doesn't seem to be the case, and which we'll get to later, and I say no, lad, we will eventually get to way into the future. We will get there eventually. But genius must teach genius. As Socrates taught Plato, as Plato taught Aristotle, Aristotle taught Alexander the Great. Another thing also, and this might seem extreme to some, no textbooks. A real teacher doesn't need textbooks. Think about it. If you're an expert in your field and you're talking to a child, why the fuck would you need to refer to a textbook? You're exposing yourself as being fraudulent. Okay, I can understand you might need some guidance and structure for what you'll teach term to term, and it can be used like print out worksheets and for a kid and shit. But what I've noticed with the simpleton teachers is that they have a complete over reliance on textbooks, which makes them panicking and discourage question even further when someone deviates from it. A teacher should have fluidity and the capacity to teach whatever the subject is at any given moment. I don't even think a classroom is necessary for a true teacher. Also, who is writing our textbooks? When a child can Google the information you're telling them is factual in a textbook and find out it's bullshit within a minute, is that not a huge problem? Is that not a huge problem that the same bullshit has been taught to children for an entire generation all across the country? Who can we hold accountable for this? You know, it should be geniuses teaching geniuses, the same as the teachers. Whereas right now, the people writing the textbooks are not geniuses. They're retarded. They should also have neutrality. Every author of these textbooks should be forbidden from having any political affiliations. It should be a matter of public record, and those that do should be put on trial for treason. You know, in an ideal world, that's what should happen, but it of course won't. Because, you know, who cares if the author is an activist? Ugh, it's only a child's brain. You know, and another point to make here is that no teacher should have a tattoo, because tattoos are dumb. Yes, even yours. I should say, nobody that's had a tattoo within the last 5 years. Actually, let's say 10 years. Because in theory, someone could get a tattoo when they're young, like they were just drunk, and they're like 20. Now they're 50, they understand it's retarded, and you know, but every tattoo really just represents a bad decision. Every tattoo is a bad decision. I know your doodlings are not an improvement on your God-given skin, but the reason behind this is not anything to do with my personal bias. There's logic to it, because anyone that's into tattoos doesn't really understand the nature of impermanence, which is vital when it's your job to administer knowledge, as it means you must know knowledge is mostly impermanent too. So you can't cling to any supposed facts or ideologies, because there's a good chance what we consider to be a fact will change over time. Again, you must welcome questioning. Like, if you've ever experienced things like thinking someone's your soulmate, or thinking you'll die for a political cause, and then you change your mind and you stop thinking those things, you're left with a sprinkling of stoicism that's good for being a teacher, which people that like tattoos simply don't have. They don't learn from their mistakes. In fact, they just add them to their body. But you see the point here? It's like, if you've had those groundbreaking experiences and you've learned from your mistakes, at no point will you ever go, oh, I'm going to put this on my body forever. For example, I used to think tattoos were cool when I was 7. When I was 7 years old, I thought tattoos are what made a cool adult.
Oh, sick sleeve, bro. Thanks, I paid lots of money for it.
And all body modifications are symptomatic of the vaginal mind too. And as I've told you before about the vaginal mind, there's no hindsight or foresight. They live completely in the now, and they're a slave to their emotions, which is another problem when you're teaching children, because you can't get mad at the pace they're learning. There's no point in ever arguing with the child. You just have to have confidence in your teaching and the future. So that brings us on to the third teacher, who is of course a victim of the vaginal mind too. Fundamentally unvirtuous, power mad, obviously vengeful. none of which you want. You want it to be as virtuous as possible. And following on from the tattoos, they should have integrity, which the vaginal mind also severely lacks. Because if you don't have integrity for your body, you don't have integrity at all. And I'll tell you a little secret. I fucked a handsome amount of women in my life. And I would say, honestly, about 98% of those women I've also fucked in the ass. Now, out of all the women that said to me, I'd never do that, that's where shit comes from, gross. What percentage of those girls do you think I fucked in the ass? Place your bets while I take a little sip of matcha. %100%. 100%, because integrity,
nil point.
You know, they can't be relied upon to maintain the meritocracy. Also, for the same reason, nobody childless. Because there's a lot of teachers that have no kids, don't want kids, and some of them actively dislike kids. And they have no skin in the game. So they're easily corrupted and will teach anything. I remember being in year 10 biology and having to copy out the pros of circumcision. Of course, there are none. Of course, it's just satanic child abuse. But the point is, why the fuck would you teach that to a child? Why would you not just say no? It is because corruption is rife from top to bottom. Corruption from the government, the textbooks, the schools, the teachers, because that wasn't written by someone indigenous. This is ultimately foreign propaganda attempting to brazenly eradicate our culture. And there's 1,000 other examples of this, 1,000 other agendas being pushed that don't necessarily have to be the government propaganda, like rewriting history, miscegenation. I'm just talking about one, but God knows what's being taught now. Because it can be literally anything when you lack integrity. I always like to say, just to preempt any future accusations of anti-Semitism against me, because, you know, that's the level they always have to stoop to. I went to a Jewish school. I've got many Jewish friends, and actually it was a Jewish friend that first red-pilled me on circumcision. Because we were in an IT class and he was looking up foreskin restoration surgery. I had no fucking clue what that was at the time. In fact, I remember gurgitating the same propaganda the mutilators spout. I was saying, oh, don't worry, man. You know, I was saying, oh, women prefer it. I mean, you know, stay the fuck away from my dick, obviously. But, you know, that's what I heard. Women prefer it. It's cleaner. It's more beautiful. More aesthetically pleasing. And we should show you how much fucking nonsense all of those things are. When you can have a 15-year-old English boy born with a natural penis, as God actually intended, parrot the same drivel, because it shows it's just been spread dogmatically, that people can only believe it without question, and that people can even spread this bollocks without any conviction, without ever having researched it at all. Just straight from the fucking media's mouth, you know, just to be polite and not hurt feelings too, I think. So I was saying shit like, I can't even tell the difference, man. And I actually couldn't too, like, not really. It's one of those things that you're desensitized to, particularly by porn. But of course, once the matrix breaks, you won't be able to unsee it. Fuck me, will you not be able to unsee it? And so I was always like, someone else's dick, why the fuck would I even care? My Jewish friend started telling me all of these problems it results in. You know, just like 1,000 things, and it turns out there are millions of people that are like, hey, you did this shit to me when I was a kid or baby, and I wish more than anything in the world that I can reverse the damage you've done. And they just all get ignored. Because it's a cult. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. It's literally what it is. It's a child abuse cult. So when there are millions of people complaining about it, they'll just go, yeah, don't listen to them. But because they've left the cult. You know, that's what happens in a cult. There are many Jews that are against circumcision, both today and throughout history. Muslims also. You just don't hear about it. Because, as I've said before, it's the highest form of blasphemy to all religions. You can either believe in circumcision or God. Never both. It's an apocryphal commandment. And well, it's not even commanded for Muslims, but both groups are already waking up to that and will naturally be anglicised even without my input. You know, that's the way it's going, because the truth is the truth, and the truth is that it's mutilation. And my mate, Johnny, that helped me with some of these jingles as well. He's an amputee. He got duped by his doctor when he was prepubescent, which is, you know, how it usually tends to go. So I just want to make the point, you know, just because I'm against child abuse doesn't mean I'm not friends with all those people. Obviously I am. But if any of them start spewing propaganda, I'll of course start roasting them. You know, they know that. Because this is an episode on education, and education is completely futile if we don't pursue truth. We must all value truth with that common goal. So without that common goal, you may as well just get fucking microchipped and bend over now. You know, another thing about a circumcision and education too, it really is an IQ test. It's the most accurate IQ test we have. Because IQ tests actually only test problem solving, pattern recognition, logic. Whereas this tests all those things, but also your gullibility, your proclivity to succumb to groupthink, your moral intelligence, because these are all the factors at play here. So anyway, of course I'll teach my kids about it, but you know, I'll just show them all of the parts, the many functions, nerves, etc., like I would for any other part of the human body. You'll also notice how all the parts and functions are missing from every diagram you will ever see of a penis currently. In every school textbook, there's just one part of the penis missing. Very conveniently, it just disappears from all school textbooks, and you never learn of all the nerves and functions the prepuce has. I wonder why. Wouldn't want to make people look foolish now, would we? That's without even mentioning the aforementioned problems of mutilating the most sacred part of the body. The botched ones. The fucking death toll. But of course, the best way to educate someone on what circumcision is just to show them a video of it. Because I don't know if you've ever seen a video of this barbarism in action before, but I highly recommend you do, because to a lot of people it's just a word in their head, or the after effect, or a faint memory, but when you see it, it'll become clear pretty instantaneously that one, it's clear child abuse, and two, anyone that's pro-mutilation is either completely paralysed by political correctness to the point where they're willing to look the other way even when it's child abuse in the hopes of not causing offence, or you know, it's a mutilated man that's in denial of reality, or someone that's just a part of a mutilated tribe, just a big fat collective cope, or they're a demon. Because that's a couple of things they won't do. They won't advocate for an age of consent, but they also won't show you a video and go, hey, look how harmless this is. Because they know whenever you see it, you'll go, oh, hello, Satan. That's where you've been hiding all this time. Well, this baby writhes in agony and blood just squirts out of them, looking like they're about to burst with pain. Like a little fucking grape. There's only one time that actually wants you to see what it is and values truth here. So, yeah.
Okay, Pab, so it might be Satan, but at least Satan is tolerant of other people's beliefs.
Yes, I'm incredibly tolerant.
Any fucking way. Perhaps we should also ask in determining who our teacher should be, what is the purpose of a school? Most people, I think, would say that it's to learn. And I do think that's one component, but I've always been sceptical of the claim that it's the sole reason. whenever I was in school and someone asked the teacher why we were there, and they'd say to learn, I'd always say, nah, we're here to pass a test, to get qualifications, to get a job. And I think both are right. I think our school should, I think for our school we should have the ambition for them to both be self-sufficient and intelligent. But the trouble is now that these things are at odds with each other. Because as I said before, all novel knowledge can only come about through questioning. And there's a huge swathe of jobs that exist in our society that require you not to think, that require you not to question. If there was a questioning populace, there wouldn't be enough people to work those jobs, and the economy would be affected. It's like that George Carlin bit. It's a big club, and you ain't a part of it. They want people intelligent enough to work the machines, but not intelligent enough to ask why they're running them. They don't want a population of critical thinkers because it's not in their interest, and that's essentially what's happening. I should also say that I don't have any real judgment for people working these menial jobs. Obviously, everyone has different circumstances, different upbringings, different responsibilities, and are at different times in their lives. I've worked a lot of pointless jobs in the past too, but my intention is just to illustrate that these jobs offer very little for the workers beyond giving them the ability to pay the bills. You know, a ransom to survive. And very little to society beyond paying the taxes. You know, I'm well aware there are a lot of other pointless jobs, call centres that have no purpose other than to send people to another fucking line, heads of diversity and inclusion. But I'm just talking about the menial jobs that make up commerce. These transnational corporations that offer zilch in terms of quality. They're all about quantity over quality, mass production, and nothing about them are an improvement on what we had. When we make our own food, we create recipes that become staples of our countries and culture, that use local ingredients and benefit our health. When we consume mass-produced foods, we get heart disease, diabetes, obesity, deaths in the tens of thousands each year. Once upon a time, we would make our own clothes, have seamstresses, thrive in textile industries, making clothes that match our climate, clothes that are made to last. Now they're all made by globalist corporations, and I swear some of them are made by moths. I've wore stuff like 2 times, and then it will get a hole in it. I say, what? Of course it isn't moths though. It's mostly child labour. You know, child labour in the third world, because that's where the jobs have been outsourced to, decimating all of our own national industries in the process. And speaking of the products not lasting long, the products are built to fail. So you must continue to consume. You know, nothing's built to last. To take iPhones and laptops, for example, they'll update the software and then say it isn't compatible with the hardware. So you're obliged to buy an upgrade. Now, I am an absolute Luddite, so do take all I say with a pinch of salt, but I think that's nothing but a massive scam. In theory, I can see a potential obstacle that may exist. Perhaps the material canvas on which software runs through must also be upgraded in order for it to work, but I don't think so. I think if that were the case, I don't think it's an insurmountable obstacle to get over anyway. We should just invest all our efforts into making our tech malleable so that the software can always be updated and the hardware doesn't have to change. But like I say, I think it's a scam anyway. The entire intention is to have a constant influx of consumers from one year's product to the next, rather than having the intention of creating one phone that has the durability to last a lifetime, which I think is absolutely possible. I mean, not only are they drip feeding us the technology, so we have the true frontier of our technology hidden from our sight. So we could actually just use the most advanced shit we have available right away. If you think about what parts are upgraded from model to model, I think it's feasible to make it as malleable as possible with the foresight of what's likely to change. were it to be an upgraded model. So like the camera might upgrade, well, just make it detachable. That's how professional cameras work already. You just replace the lenses. So I think you could just do that on a micro level that way. If someone wants to pay for an upgrade for the newer shit, they always can. But right now, they don't give you an option. They just make you totally dependent on the technology, knowing you need to use all the apps and like internet and everything in your daily life, and then force you to upgrade. You know, it's just wasteful on a material level. And I'm not against tech. I think we should do everything to the best of our ability. But think about Concorde. We have the ability to get from London to New York in like 2 hours, or maybe it's longer, like 2 or 3 hours. And the reason we don't use it is for economic reasons, because it isn't seen as being as profitable for the airlines. So it's actually hindering our ability to reap the dividends of technological advancement. Another thing too, I saw a documentary on Japan, and I think we got a lot of similarities with Japan in my country. You know, it's like a politeness. We're both islanders, and it's a real like artisan culture. And although I think Japan's been subverted, and I think you will see the realities of that if they don't do something about it in the next 10, 20, 30 years, but they have managed to retain elements of their artisan culture. So this documentary I saw was about strawberries, and you see Japan grows the most expensive strawberries on the planet. So they're like £500 per strawb, and the reason why I bring this up is a couple of reasons. One is that Britain used to be quite big in the strawberry game back in the day. You know, the royal sovereign in 1892, and that was what it was all about. Just whatever it is you're doing, do it to the best of your ability. But the other thing is that, you know, people think that our economy must be bolstered by quantity and not quality. But I think that there is still elements of Japan and this artisan culture, which we, like I say, we shared, that proves that that's not true. You can have a culture that's based upon, like, you know, the individual and just striving to be the absolute best in what you do, rather than just, you know, just a quantity, just low quality products for the corporations. And the thing is with that, with the this element of our culture is self-worth. Because the idea you could say, okay, I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability, but that's very hard when you have one of these corporate jobs, because it's like nobody cares if you're doing the job to the best of your ability. They don't care if you're the best shelf stacker in the world. The CEO of that supermarket doesn't even care if you're the best shelf stacker, because they'll replace you with technology in a heartbeat, and they've proven that they're willing to do that and they can do that. So, you know, it's very hard for you to have this self-worth. Whereas if you're like, hey, here's my craft, here's my profession, and you just continue to improve and push the boundaries of that, then you have a feeling of self-worth. So like the impact on like, you know, mental health and all this kind of stuff is far-reaching too. And another component here is like, you got to think about how unfriendly this is from like, you know, your leader's perspective, because, you know, as your king, my economic advice to you would be, you know, if you have money, invested into your family and invested into your career. That's my advice for you. Like, fuck everything else, just invest in those things. Whereas what the kind of like party line is right now is they'll say, oh no, just buy as much shit as you can, and the more you buy, the better the economy will do. But really, it seems to me a lot of the time the economy is just like, oh, it means the billionaire corporations are profiting. But it's like from an individual level of you, it's like, no, you've just been told to buy a product you didn't need, and now you're, you know, a little bit poorer as a result of buying it. Like, so yeah, I'd say invest in your career. So anyway, you think about all these things, and like, okay, well, that sounds pretty negative. So why are we going along with that? Like, and again, it's to do with what's in it for the government, because of what they get in return, and also like this whole relationship affects the government's policies and politics. Like, you think about why are they pushing atheism. Now, I'm personally of the belief that everything in the world's run by demons, but even if you go, okay, it's just on a human level, it makes sense for it to be atheist, because to spend that much time doing these menial jobs, it's like you couldn't do that if you believe that you were created by God for a purpose. There's no way you would go like, oh, okay, my whole reason for being on Earth is to move this to this place in order for these other people to make an exorbitant amount of money in comparison to me. It's like, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, And then you even think about the hours of work too, because people keep having to work longer and longer hours for less and less pay, and what we're kind of being ushered towards is like a neo-feudalism. Just a return to feudalism, it seems, where people are just like serfs, working for the longest hours for very little pay, just basically to survive. And I say it impacts politics profoundly, because this, and I am of the opinion also that democracy is just a sacred cow. But what's produced from it is that they have no obligation for you to have a skill to do these jobs. So it basically means that the unquestioning populace buys into this, so-called democratic system whereby they can use propaganda on you. Because they can't use propaganda on people who are questioning all the time, like, is this propaganda, is that propaganda? That doesn't work. So, that's a huge benefit to all politicians, that they'll have an unquestioning population, because they can just manipulate people's opinions. Like, the idea like a democracy is representative of the people, it's like, not really, because they can just manipulate your opinion, and through the media, and then they will just like pretend they're kind of just meeting the demands of the people that they manufactured in those people from day one. You know what I mean? So it's really just a tyranny. So that's a huge thing that comes about through this, because they can create an unquestioning population. It impacts what's even taught in school, and who it's taught to, because again, like, this kind of with this kind of system, they can go like, okay, we're gonna, for the state schools, they're gonna have like manual and menial labour jobs. The boarding schools, so like private schools, they can be the kind of like media class, maybe some scientists, whatever. And then like the elite of the boarding schools, like Eton and Harrow, that's going to make up the leaders. There will be the CEOs and the politicians and stuff. And so it's this kind of like godlike determinism, but the thing is, they're not gods, they're people. So when people often try and play gods, they get it wrong, because God's God, and God decides who people are in life, not these people. So they get it wrong, and it doesn't work on like a societal level. People get told to do jobs that they don't want to do, but they're just told to do because they're born into that particular class. But it's all it's all manufactured through this. And as I say, when there's no skills required, it means they don't have to educate the populace. There's no skills required for someone leaving school. Like, you think about who can do a job to a professional standard by the age of 16 when leaving school, and it's really just like sports people. It's like footballers, or like fucking judo, or maybe actors or something. It's but the thing is with all of those things is that their parents have pushed them into it through like extracurricular activities. So it's not, they haven't learnt it in school. And it's like a real crux of like my pedagogical philosophy here, and it's really just a perception change, which is that people view school as being like the source of education rather than it being the supplement to education. That you never stop learning is the reality, and school's just a place you should go to and go, okay, here's where I got some information here, but when I come home from school I'll still learn, and when I leave school as an adult I'm still going to continue to learn. But again, that comes into the whole thing with the amount of hours they want people to work, because a lot of people are just like plateau on whatever intelligence they have upon leaving school, because you never have the time to go, okay, I'm going to really improve my intelligence. They just stay the same because, in people's spare time, they just want to do fun shit. They don't really want to continue to educate themselves. And yeah, that's like a fundamental perception change. I think that has to occur with this, but they want dependency. That's why, there's this like our entire system is based upon Plato's Republic. And if you read Plato's Republic, I mean, not only does it say, it hates artists, which we'll get to, but it says they will take the kids away from the family at 4 years old so that they will be dependent upon the state. And that's exactly what's happening in our society. And there's this kind of like idea that there will be a conversation between the school and the parents as to who's to teach what. But the thing is, there isn't. The only communication really is when you join the school and like a parents' evening or something. But then there's this assumption of like, okay, well, what should be taught? And it's like, well, everything that's taught by the school is what happens when you have that perception of school being the source of education, and the system just completely buy into that, because, I say, it creates a relationship of complete dependency. And so, this is like a fundamental change in all this when I started thinking about it, because I basically realised as a result of this, as a result of the propaganda that schools are being used for by governments, instead of them saying, okay, we want a thinking populace, and also those, like the government being completely dependent on those corporations. Because the thing is, with the corporations, they have us by the balls. So it's not like at any point we can go like, okay, well, they can go fuck themselves, because it's like we're not independent as a nation. So they can just say that, okay, well, you're an island and you import your food. So we can just starve you to death if you want to try and rebel, or we'll sanction you or whatever else. So it's like it's so important that we become independent as a nation. We become actually self-sufficient, and then they would have no control over the politicians. But right now they're completely in cahoots with one another, those corporations and the globalist puppets. And yeah, so when it's that situation and they're profiting from the phony system, and they're profiting from having an unquestioning populace, it's not sincere. The idea, like, you're there to learn, you're not. You're there to become a worker, and that's at odds with those jobs, with the system, to being educated. So I decided the solution to all of this is that it must be an academy, because it can't be done on a national level. And as we talked about before, with the communication of parents and the importance of, these teachers being parents and having skin in the game, I have determined that homeschooling is what my solution will be. And on top of that, we'll talk about them not having a skill, not required to have a job when they're 16. So that's the other fundamental change. It'll be a craft school, and as I say, as I'm an artist myself, then our particular academy will be an art school. It'll be an art academy, which will, I'm sure ruffle the globalist feathers, as it's based upon Plato's Republic. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that then change as a result of this. And I should say there's other reasons that it can't be a reform we'll get to, but that's a fundamental one. It's the propaganda. Like they get so much benefit from the propaganda and from this codependency of politician and corporation. But yeah, as I said, we'll get to more of that as these episodes develop, I think. But so it gives you like an interesting situation when you say it's an academy, because it means you can kind of decide who's in your class, and also then it makes you think like, how many people will you teach? Because, you know, if you're the father, I mean, there's such an importance that whatever you're investing into this, it's very important. You can't just have anyone in your class, because this is literally going to be decades of your life, and you might only have one opportunity. In theory, you could teach when you're like, you know, a grandfather too. But if this is just your own children, you've got to think, okay, who's going to be there? And a lot of people kind of make some criticisms about homeschooling, and they'll say like, oh, well, no, they're really weird. And I'll be honest with you, I've never met someone who's been homeschooled, but I always hear people say like, oh, people who homeschool is really strange. But then I think like, I don't know if they are strange, or they're just like fundamentally like religious fundamentalists, and that's what's making them peculiar to you. And it's nothing to do with homeschool. But a lot of people make the claim it's the social elements. Well, it's like, I think like those can be mitigated. You know, like if you were to just purely homeschool, I think that you know, you could have them join martial arts things or like football clubs or whatever, and you could mitigate those social damages. And also the kind of the humor of this is when they talk about like as if the state schools are, you know, utopias, and it's not like full of bullying, and the most anxious people have ever met are not from the state school. Everyone's full of depression and anxiety, and there's like popularity and bullying. Like, you know, I mean, it's not like Eden in any of those places. But as I say, I think we can mitigate those damages. And in the way I kind of want to set up this whole these education episodes is that you can just mimic this system for whatever size of class you have. If you had like 2 kids and you wanted to steal the system, you could easily do that. But if you have more, then it would work for that also. It's an adaptable system I'll come up with here. But yeah, that begs the question, like with the kind of social element of what's the ideal number to teach, which I think is 10, because I've been in big schools and small schools, but I think with the number of 10, you can keep an eye on everyone at all times. There's enough sociability happening. And as I said, the kind of luxury with deciding it's an academy, you decide who's going into your school, because, you know, you've got to be careful about who you allow into your school, because the thing is with a school is, especially at this point on a national level, your kids are being raised by everyone else's crazy kids. It's the place your children will spend most of their time, and where they'll see the craziest things and be influenced most. Hear the first swear words, etc. Fuck, I saw some wild things in the schools I went to. I remember I sold porn for a little bit when I was around 11, because I was the one being the bad influence for other kids when I was in school. And but then I got put out of business because there was another kid that started selling animal porn. And I remember seeing a video of a woman being fucked by a horse, bent over a stable with 1.5 foot of stallion cock inside of her, and the word on the schoolyard was that she died. She died from internal bleeding. So, you know, I wonder what her headstone reads now. Death by horsecock. You know, how foolish would you feel if that was your last moment on Earth? Just watching Maya dissolve as your soul ascends towards the light. Then you look down and think, oh, what a faux pas. What a peccadillo. While your corpse slumps over the stable door and a gallon of pink liquid oozes out of you. Like you're a human yazoo. My zoo? What about your zoo? Don't come to my zoo, it's where the problem began. So, what folly. Oh, what folly. The folly of a size queen. She, she must feel like quite the ignoramus when she meets her ancestors in the afterlife, and they all say, oh, what a numpty. What a numpty. It's a bloody horse. It's equestrian. And, yeah, I mean, imagine if I was your daughter. There's no way you could have predicted that would be the outcome when he was stood by Seabiscuit as the hero father, introducing him to his daughter on her 7th birthday. I wonder how many times he replays that memory in his head. There are so many unanswered questions I have. I wonder if the horse lives a life consumed with guilt, just staring into the hills looking sorry while zoologist asks him, why the long face? Or if he knew what he was doing all along. And was just going, this is for all the times you fed me apples and hay while you had pizza. Just a little rapscallion stallion. Just, Seabiscuit turned red rum. Anyway, I saw that. I saw fights all the time. I saw maybe a billion fights. I saw one time there's this Wigger girl, a Wigress. She was ginger, but had a name like Saliqua Jakembe. Just she's as pale as the moon. She's one of those girls where, if you looked at her mitochondria under a microscope, I'm sure it would spell Wonderlust. But, she was always fighting or arguing. I think I saw her happy maybe like 2 times. And it was when she was doing a crip walk. She looked like Jar Jar Binks with rickets. Fucking cornrows on fleek. Anyway, I saw her get knocked out one time. And then a bunch of black kids started surrounding her and going, oh, world star, yo, world star. And then one of them just started like fingering her when she was unconscious. So I saw that. I remember when I was in year 6, the school bell went for home time. And as we went in the hallway to get our coats, there was one Iraqi kid from the year below. And I don't know, maybe the school bell set off some PTSD or something. But he was just squatting, giving us some corn-fed culture and enriching the linoleum with a big fat log, just taking a shit while he smiled at us like a Cheshire cat. The weirdest thing I've ever saw, and I've got to say fuck you in advance for even considering getting offended by this, because I don't even want to tell you. This isn't just the most fucked up thing I've seen in a school. This is the most fucked up thing I've seen in my entire life. But I didn't ask to see it. Me and 35 other children bear witness to this. So now the duty falls upon me to just tell the world about it. I'm really just recounting to you what happened here. So, I was in year 6 in Miss Hayes' class, and she went into the stock cupboard, and I always wondered what happened when a teacher went into this stock cupboard. Did those disappear for like 15 minutes? And I'd pondered if they'd entered Narnia and were snorting some lines of snow with the White Witch, or sucking on Mr. Tumnus' goat cock. As we've already established, bestiality was in vogue back in 2004. Anyway, the whole class were just talking to each other, and suddenly, by coincidence, it just fell completely silent for a second. And in this vacuum of pin-drop silence arose a voice saying, suck it, just suck it. And so then I swiveled my head, and I saw the gay kid in our class with his pants completely down by his ankles with his maggot out, and he was getting the girl with Down syndrome in our class to just suck his dick, and she's just lapping away going like a bug-eyed Gene Simmons, because her tongue was big, and just absolutely oblivious to the crimes being committed, a chromosome away from consent. And I actually think this was a revenge rape too, because a couple of years earlier, this gay kid was swinging back on his chair, and we had rows of tables So it's like a table and one behind and one behind. And the girl with Down syndrome just pulled his chair back. And so he hit his head on the table behind and cracked his head open. Had to go to like hospital, ambulance was called. And it was mad because all the teachers were just like, oh yes, it was just an accident, nothing to see here. And it's like, it fucking wasn't an accident. Like I witnessed the whole thing. I was about 2 seats away from the incident. And she just kind of like shape-shifted into cognizance. She looked kind of beautiful for about 12 seconds. And he's just swinging back on his chair. And she just went, nah. And just fucking grabbed his chair and swung it back. And yeah, everyone just kind of like covered it up and just pretended it didn't happen because they weren't his biggest fan. I also think it's funny that people called him the gay kid. Because our gaydar would have been on pretty... on point, I think, because it turned out to be true. He was the gay kid, but maybe it wasn't that amazing after all, because I just had a memory of him, and he did speak like a woman, and also have a memory of him being like year 2, going, let's play doctor, and then looking across the schoolyard, he's just like spanking some kids bare ass. So maybe Hercule Poirot can keep his job. Perhaps Poirot's job's safe for now. So this brings us on to who we can't allow into the academy. And I'll begin by saying no Downies, which I know it doesn't sound the greatest thing. And listen, we have more listeners with Down syndrome than any other podcast. So, let me just address you directly. If this was a school for hugging, mate... you would be the first name on the team sheet, but as we're trying to emulate Archimedes, Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, I don't think they had Down syndrome. In fact, I'm almost certain that they didn't. And this is the kind of point here, is anything that's going to divert us from the end goal of producing geniuses, we've just got to say no to. And that's the kind of luxury of the academy here. And this whole thing of like integrating it on like a state school level, like integrating everyone, is another crucial problem for why the education system can't be reformed on a national level. Because it not only is it like it's just a propaganda wing, but it's also, it sees itself as a charity. So it says like everyone's welcome, and which again sounds nice on paper, but also she's trying to eat a jumper. So can we just address that might not be conducive to the rest of the classes, education, and that's the point. It's like it's this kind of thing where it's people making these rules that are not in the thick of it, because they've got like, oh, that sounds nice, just like put them there. But it's like, I remember being a kid in a class with someone with Down syndrome, and it's like just never being able to concentrate on my work. Like every single time we were sitting by each other, like I would just be thinking, what the fuck? What is happening? Because I know you kind of gather that there's enough like political correctness. Like you kind of already understand, like you can't say anything, otherwise you will be deemed as the immoral person. And so no one speaks out about it, no one says anything, but it's like that's the true thought of like a 10-year-old in that situation. There's like, I don't understand what this is, and I can't concentrate. I can't have this like Zen-like focus you want me to have, because what the fuck's going on? And then you grow up and you realise it's just a byproduct of feminism. It's just women being told to have children too late, and that's what the whole thing is. But the point is, it's distracting. You really can't work hard in that situation, and the whole thing of it like being virtue signaling is like because the justification will be, okay, well, but they need to be integrated into society. And it's like, that's not virtuous. Like I said, with all virtue signaling, it's like you need real virtue to replace virtue signaling in these times. And And when they say they need to integrate everyone into society, it's like, that's not a good thing. You really look into it, as I'm sure you will all know. It's like you don't find someone with Down syndrome who lives to be like 90 years old. They're like fraught with a lot of like heart problems, a lot of like crazy stuff. They die quite young, and it's like, that's not the moral thing to go, okay, well, let's make them work for McDonald's. Like, that's not the moral thing. In my world, that person goes, okay, you've been given a tough card in life, so, in my world, you get to go on roller coasters 24/7. I'll give you an ounce of weed, a tab of acid. I'll buy you a hooker. They won't get you a hooker because they don't think you're human. But you'll be having this degenerate in a full Nelson in no time. And then she'll call her father and say, once she scrubbed a stench of tartar sauce off her tits, she'll say, Papa, I've reconsidered. It's not empowering after all. So, we're feeding 2 Jewesses with 1 bagel there. And the same lie of empowerment that's told to that girl has been told to people with Down syndrome. Like, this is, it's empowering, you're a part of society. It's like, who's that empowering for? That you're flipping burgers for McDonald's. It's like, the corporations, surprise, surprise, and the taxman. It's not empowering to you. You want to be a crucial worker in our society. Okay, let's build Stonehenge. Let's move a boulder, because your strength is strength itself. You know what I mean, mate? I don't know if you've noticed that, but I have. But that's, for some reason, that's the taboo thing to say. You know what I mean? Just to notice that's this is all a bit pointless. We've been doing the next thing, which is no fresh off the boat refugees. Again, also virtue signaling, which all pro-immigration stances are based upon virtue signaling, and it's always women. So it's women and men that have the minds of women, who are just completely open borders. That's something you'll notice, and once you realise there's a finite number, so there's only a finite number of schools and hospitals and houses and everything, it's like you realise the futility of all of it. So whatever it is they're claiming that immigration is supposed to save, it can't be done. I mean, without a genocide, you can't just like replace the whole population, and you only have that finite amount of numbers. So whatever it is they're claiming to like save through immigration, they never are. The issue's never solved through immigration, and then you have all these other problems that can also come about from it, but they'll completely ignore that and just call you racist or whatever. So they make it like into like a moral thing for immigration. But what I would like to point out for immigration is just to expose that nonsense. And there's anything moral about it, there's anything more than just moving people from one side of the planet to another. Is that my immigration policy is we should only have sexy women. No men and no children, only sexy women. And you will see how the perceptions of everyone currently pushing for immigration will completely change. Because right now Susan is a 7, so she can kind of get away with it, and everyone just goes like, "Oh, okay, well, Susan's a 7, so we'll go along with that." And it's those kind of girls that wait at train stations, like they're about to meet the Beatles, going, "Give me an R, give me an E, give me an F-U-G, woo!" And then then one of them asks, "Hey, where's Astrid today?" Of course, Astrid couldn't make it. She's at the Turkish border with a missing tooth, bruises on her legs, lying next to some blood-stained baklava as a goat herder licks his machete. They'll hear about her in about 3 weeks when her father's talking about it on the news, saying, "Yeah, diversity is our strength," crying as as you know, as Aeolus plays his daughter like a woodwind instrument to her gaping orifices the reeds, and fucking Angela Merkel presses a gun to his back as he reads from the teleprompter. You know, so Sally conveyed. You know, that's the situation now, but they'll go, oh, come on, that's only happened like 5 times, you know, and, you know, she probably fucking deserved it anyway. She's probably fucking like Nazi DNA. So here's the point: is there's women right now in the shadow of the Cali cartel, voluptuous women that they are currently depriving of asylum because of their beauty. Like, how is that moral? You know, they're in no less danger than any other refugee that they're claiming to help. Again, mostly fighting age men. And now these voluptuous women have been deprived from you know, our protection. So, you know, the second a boatload of Venezuelan bombshells arrive, you know, Susan's a 4 now. You know, that's what happens. Susan's a 4 now. Shut up, Esmeralda, come hither. And you know, within a week of that, of just making immigration a Deliveroo service for Vikings and just getting the beautiful women of the world, the same people who are advocating for it now, like, there's fucking wetbacks everywhere. You know, the House of Sound will be on a Zoom call with wands surrounding him, obese monobrows. He'll be saying, "Oh, please, my friend, please, you must preserve your culture." You know, we can say, "Scheherazade, come and read me a bedtime story." You know, and you might say, "Oh, Pab, that's a scene from Ali G, the Ali G film." But you know, great minds think alike. And my point here is that there's no virtue to it at all. You know what I mean? Like the second you change immigration, it's like, hey, we're only going to take the sexy women, suddenly everyone will be against it. I'm going, like, that's a terrible thing. It's like, well, yeah, when it's really no different, you're not helping anyone anyway. And yeah, I mean, you could base it on anything. You know, currently the kind of supposed improvement would be, hey, we're going to base it on, you guessed it, the economy. We're going to bring it in because of the economy, and the reason why they bring in, you know, those who are least compatible with our culture. Again, the corruption, the economy of the you know, corrupt people, rather than saying, okay, well, let's have immigration based on happiness. You know, I mean, let's have immigration based on who's the funniest people, and we'll have those. Who knows the most jokes? Let's bring that. But you know, that's. But I don't need to justify myself here. And no one knows my real views. I could be, you know, completely for it. I could say everyone should be an immigrant. I should say, you know, maybe, but also maybe I could say the whole thing's nonsense. You don't know my thoughts. And but my point here is with why it's a negative thing for the academy is that well, I should say I've had Kosovan friends that came when they were like 5 or 6, and they assimilated fairly well, you know. But the reason for that is that basically school in our country begins at like the age of 10 or 11. So if they come at like 5, they're not really learning anything, and they can just be around everyone. The point is really with teenagers, because I remember being in these low set classes, and we'd be reading, say like in an English class. We'd be out 13 and someone just comes, don't speak a word of English, and everyone has to read the book, and it goes around the class and we'll like read a sentence each, and they'll get to this guy and they'll just go and then you go, hey, this is slowing everybody else down. You know, it's really becomes a hindrance, and the point here is that intellect is an osmosis. You know, it's like the people. If you're around intelligent people, you will increase your intelligence. You're trying to up your game, and if you're around less intelligent people, you will dumb yourself down in order to fit in. This is like, you know, human nature that they completely neglect. So it's not even good for the immigrant. Like I say, like it's not good for the disabled people. Basically, any time someone tries to versus and claim to represent a minority or disenfranchised, it's never for their benefit. It never works out well for that person. And it's the same thing here with this whole refugee thing for children in our schools. It doesn't work well. On another side point here, just on the intellect being an osmosis thing. I don't know if you've ever met a so-called like native Englishman that doesn't understand the difference between where's and there's and yours and everything, and you speak to them and they're like, yeah lad, I've got learning difficulties, you know, and then you look at the friends and you're like, oh, it's like 6 Mo's, fucking like Ahmed Abdul, fucking Abdi, and you're like, oh yeah, we've got learning difficulties. Is the difficulty learning the years not 1443? And we don't read books backwards in this country, you know. And that's the point. It's intellect is an osmosis. So everyone dumbs each other down. But here's my solution for this, because of course you go, okay, well, too little, too late here now. So, you know, what's the solution for that? And although this is an academy, I will every now and again give my solutions for the state school still, because I'm just a generous man. And so I do have a solution for this, which is really just about the nonsense of sets. Because what currently happens is with the set system in our state schools, is that you know, say like someone comes and they're fresh off the boat refugee, don't really speak a word of English, they'll get put in like the lowest set around everyone else of that same level, plus the troubled kids of our schools, and it's like they just stagnate in those sets. As we're saying, with intellect being an osmosis, they should just put one in a higher set, and then they'll have to up the game. And then anyway, I started thinking about this, and also learn English. You know what I mean? Like that should be the main focus. Like a refugee centre where they just learn English, focus on nothing but English. Because if they don't know English, they're going to struggle in school. Which again, how is that beneficial to that immigrant if they're just going to struggle the whole time because they don't even know the language, and also assimilate into the culture? But again, I don't get too down this rabbit hole. But I think the whole reason they're here is because it's then a blockade for us restoring our culture. Because they'll go, no, you can't talk about your culture because that interferes with whatever their culture is. So, you know, but anyway, that's what it should be. If we were a sovereign nation, which we're not, it would be send them to a refugee centre, have them learn English, have them assimilate to our culture, and then it would be much easier. But then I started to think like about sets and how, like, basically in our schools, it's like it's a real communist outlook where they say like basically all teachers are of equal level, and that's the party line, and you're not allowed to say like there's no teacher better than another teacher, you know, and which is nonsense. So what they could do for the sets is they could rank the teachers and say, okay, who's performing better as a teacher, and then you have the best teacher teach the worst sets, you know what I mean, and have it kind of fluctuate. And even the best teacher, we say, like, sometimes the best teacher isn't the best teacher for the worst kids. Like, I've been in classes, particularly in the arts classes too, where I've been in the lowest sets, and our teacher just wouldn't give a shit about it because it's like the kids are just all naughty and like throwing chairs and stuff. So it's like they don't care about this class. But then if you see them with like the set one, the kids who are there to learn and already have an aptitude for art, then they're like really, you know, talkative and like they love it. They're in the job for those kids. They're in the job to teach to those kids, but not to the naughty kids. So, you know, they're just not good at improving kids. So maybe that's how you could do the ranking, But yeah, I mean, the way I see it is this: that if this is a good teacher, they should get a huge pay rise. You know, they should get quadruple the wage. But you know, some of these teachers that we have now, you know, shouldn't be paid at all. They should be we should feed them to the lions, I think. But anyways, I was thinking about all of this, and then I thought, you know, the solution is just the nonsense of sets altogether. It's just go, hey, let's just Hogwarts it. That's my solution for the national system. Just Hogwarts it and say, hey, there's no set one, there's no set two. Just have a leaderboard, and set one can become set two, and set, you know what I mean, set three can become set five. Like it's just a leaderboard. And, you know, but again, that would encourage the meritocracy, which they despise. They don't want to have a leaderboard and say, oh, someone's better than the other. They want everyone the same. So, you know, it's but anyway, that's my advice. And the final thing, final group, and I say this with a heavy heart, but the final group that will not be allowed into the academy is girls. The whole point of this is that I say it's going to be my own offspring, and I just have an incredibly strong male gene. Like, I'm the youngest. I have 3 older brothers. Like, my dad had 3 brothers. My mum's the only girl. She got 2 brothers. One has 3 boys. The other has 7 boys. Like, it's just a crazy strong male gene in my family. That's one aspect. And unless, you know, we've had a lot of fun here. Let's get serious for a minute too. Is also the way I see it in my tribe, and that's what this is. This is a tribe of scholars. Is that the fathers should teach the sons, and the mothers should teach the daughters. And so, if I were to have daughters, then I would still leave it to the mother to teach those daughters. Which, when you really think about it, is an incredibly feminist stance. That's the true feminist stance, because I have enough confidence in my wife that she would be able to give useful skills to our daughter. Anything other than that stance is pretty much saying women are not capable of any skill by themselves, and they're not capable to be teachers. So it's like, well, you know, that sounds pretty misogynistic if you ask me. And also the thing is, it's like, okay, I believe we are currently living through a time which is the culmination of a cosmic battle between good and evil. And I believe in this battle you'll have a lot of you'll even have prostitutes and single mothers and single women and lesbians and everything else that will be a part of good in that battle. And that's sincere. That's as sincere as I can be. But also, if we are ever going to have peace, to have good and present mothers, it's non-negotiable. This has to be an element of society, so someone has to do that. There has to be people who say, you know what, I'm just going to be a mother, and I'm going to... And also, like, I know that if my wife knows how to be a good wife, that's something that needs to be taught. You know, it needs to be taught, those skills. So yeah, no, it's all very important. In my tribe, then... the mothers teach the daughters and the fathers teach the sons, and that's just how it is. But I wouldn't say that's gospel for you. If you say, okay, well, I don't mind it being a mixed school and stuff, you're free to do that. It's not gospel, but I'm just telling you how it's going to progress, because also the way it's going to work with the whole like group of 10 and physicality will come in. You'll see in the later episodes. I think it's going to fuck it up a bit. In theory, you could say like, okay, the primary education could be mixed and then change it, but for me, it's just it works out better this way. But I do say it with a heavy heart, because it's kind of my favourite pastime from being in school. I was only ever in mixed schools, and I think from maybe like year 7 onwards, that was just the best part about school, was just like learning how to flirt with girls. And it's nothing's ever like it again in life, where just hundreds of girls and you just go there and like flirt with them, and, you know, reap the dividends when you finger bang them at the next party. But I really think to it and go, hey, is it also a distraction from creating geniuses? 100% it's a distraction, because I was always distracted in school by girls being there. And as much as I loved it, as much as some of my fondest memories, it's like, it really is a distraction from creating geniuses. Like, if I said to anyone else in the world, like, do you have the memory of being in a mixed school and then having just like this just debilitating stiffy and this erection, and just being told like, hey, write something on the board, and then you have to get up and you're like, you know, just like your dick brushes past this like poor girl's ear. But that's a universal experience wherever you're from, because it's like, it just happens, you know. It's really the strange universal bonus. And honestly, I don't even really want teachers. Because we can always try and be nice and go like, oh, yeah, but can't you like separate sex and education? So it's like, yeah, but no, because I even remember, even when I was prepubescent, seeing a female teacher, and they weren't attractive. They, they were like 50 with like saddlebags. But I remember just there just thinking, fuck, I want to piss in her mouth. You know what I mean? And so, it's at this point you might be asking, well, Pab, who is going to be in this fantastical academy of yours? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's going to be my 4 sons. I say I've got a very strong male gene, and I'm of the opinion that if you intend on having less than 4 children in this world, you should be considered a homosexual. You're an honorary member of the alphabet group going forward in this country, because it's actually funny if you look into it, because it's actually to do with immigration. Like, you look into, hey, why do you need immigration, or what's the constant influx of immigrants with no end in sight? They'll go, oh, it's because there's a low birth rate. But it's to quote Jiddu Krishnamurti, the problem and the solution are never separable from one another. So if the problem is that we have a low birth rate, surely the solution should be to have more children. I think people have missed that memo on go forth and multiply, not dwindle and divide. But of course, this doesn't happen. The opposite happens. They say, don't have kids, get your tubes tied, have an abortion. But an abortion is not only a right to some women, it's seen as a rite of passage. If you know some of the women I've met in my life. So yeah, they try and discourage having children at every step, because it's the whole thing's manufactured. This population crisis, and another thing with it too is that it's a completely globalist perspective, because what they'll say is it's climate change, but it's like, yeah, who accounts for that? Like, oh yeah, India and China. You want to talk about like overpopulation, and even they're fucked for overpopulation, because it's like China tried the one-child policy, and now they're pretty much fucked from it, because it's like, with the aging population, it's like you basically, if you have so many positions that are a necessity for your society to function, the idea like, oh, we're just going to like half and like a quarter that, and that you're not going to have a problem in the future, it's like, no, you will. So even those countries, I don't know what they can really do about it, but the idea is like, oh, it's Britain, and that if you have less kids, that it's somehow going to fucking save the planet. It isn't. And yeah, and it's just a fucking, it's just a like an excuse for immigration. And another thing is the arrogance of that worldview. You think this is the time where it's fucking, there's never going to be a war. You think it's going to be, because if that were to be the case, it would be the only century in human history for that to happen. So you might want to get up some backup supplies. But anyway, yeah, 4 boys. There'll be 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I know some people might say that could be a bit of a problem. I don't think so. I mean, I think people learn at different ages, and I'm confident that by the end of it, everyone will come out, having the same level of knowledge, and whatever kind of differences there could be, and we'd find out. From that, I feel like the pros outweigh the cons, and the pros are that there will be a brotherly togetherness, and more so than there is in school generally, because this will be one class from the age of like 4 to like 21, so they're always going to be together. There'll be a real brotherly togetherness, because I have 3 older brothers. We have nothing in common, but the reason for that is again just to do with the breakup of the family, where they'll say it's when like they're all raised by different teachers. I'm raised by different teachers. we all have different friends. It's like that's going to create different people. You know, I'm not saying like everything in life's a complete like tabula rasa, but you know, for sure, your environment, you know, really shapes who you are. So, you know, a brother should have more in common than just football and fighting, and you know, when that is all you have, it will just create discord in the family and make it a not a very pleasant thing. So they'll be joined by a Russian. See, the luxury of the academy too is that we don't have to accept anyone. You know, which means we can raise the bar pretty high. So I want to bring in a kind of like multi-instrumentalist from day one. You know, and we can do that. So we got a Russian, and he was born not far off from the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, and as a result of this, he has 3 balls, and his name's Hugh Janikobolikov, and the Janikobolikovs have a long line of musicians within the family, but they've also got a few military personnel in their family tree also. So you know, very Soviet. And you might be saying, "Oh, Pab, but you know, don't you need some kind of, you know, a unity? You know, is an extra bollock not too much adversity for one man to face alone?" Well, you see, that's where the next classmate comes in, and he's actually 3,000 years old and from Astra Reticuli, and he goes by the name of Zoingbop, and the only thing is that he can't speak without going zoing boing zoing boing boing zoing, and that's what he has to say. You know, otherwise he'll explode, and it'll be like a giant a nuclear bomb will decimate the planet. So he has to say that. You know, you had to say that to him before everything goes zoing boing zoing boing zoing boing zoing. And you know, I might have just got that wrong, and if I did get it wrong, then you know, you say goodbye to Grandma. And yeah, I say he's from Astra Reticuli, but he also has 3 testicles. You know, he's what's known as an extraterrestrial, and after those guys, we'll have another musical prodigy. Like I said, it is an art school. We will be doing music in there. And I just have such little respect for the primary education system as it is, and as we'll get to in the next episode, I think. Like, you know, I think they should, you know, have a real talent. So I looked on the internet, saw some like North Korean kids playing Mozart on guitar. So we'll have one of them, and this entire endeavour, by the way, is funded by North Korea, and you can quote me on that. I love North Korea. North Korea is the best place on the whole planet. I mean, you know, I don't know why more people don't do what they do. This child will be called Pak Choi. So we got my 4 sons, Huja Nikobolikov, Zoingbop, Pak Choi, and then what I want then is at 7, I want 3 bastards. Now, I did consider at one point forbidding bastards from entering the school, because, you know, I am a bastard myself, and yeah, we're pretty unruly customers, you know, and I said before, we don't want anyone to deter us from our end goals, and if one of our goals is to make my children virtuous people, there's a blockade to virtue when you're a bastard. I mean, you have to think about why is bastard even an insult? You know, and it's because historically our ancestors knew the disaster that would result from the breakup of the family. And so bastard was used as a slur to be a deterrent from the situation we have now, because they understood the importance of marriage and a family, which is what people have seem to have forgotten. And it's an absolute disaster. I don't know if you have what's it, eyeballs, but it's it's easily within the top 3 worst things on the planet. The most destructive things on the planet today is destroying the family, and I'm a byproduct of that. You know, I say you have an unequal balance of masculine and feminine energy in your life. You know, it's like you've just become a real volatile, unbalanced person, and I say I grew up with a lot of bastards. I'm a bastard. My brother's a bastard. Everyone I grew up with in my area went to prison. You know, I don't know anyone from every single like political outlook should be against the breakup of the family. Like if you claim to be like, oh, I'm for the impoverished or whatever, it's like, okay, you're sentencing someone to live in a ghetto, because that's what's going to happen. When you, I mean, there'll be rare exceptions, you know, where like someone will have like a rich grandparent or something, but generally, if you're having children out of wedlock and then breaking up, because that's what will happen, then you know what you're doing is basically you know, rendering them fucking rendering them fodder for the ghetto, for the gangs. And then on top of that, you know, the likelihood of being abused increases a fucking millionfold, because now you have the parents who are not there. They have to go out to work, so they're just neglected. Like, you're just, you know, alone all the time. So yeah, it opens up a whole other can of worms. And of course, all of those things then breed the same nonsense for generations. So it's not even just a crime that affects you, the perpetrator, and the other person, the victim. It's like, no, this goes on for generations. Like, it reverberates. It's a fucking absolute shit show. But we can do an episode on the entire destruction of the family another time, and I'm sure we will. But obviously, you know, this crossed my mind, and that was the whole motive behind, you know, being like, you know, skeptical for it. But the thing is that, and I started to think, well, I'm a bastard. John Lennon, Leonardo da Vinci, like there's a real proclivity for bastards to kind of become artists, and so being an art school would be kind of a bit weird to ignore that. And I felt like it kind of served two things, because if anything I've said that, you know, you might think, oh, Pab's not a good man or whatever. Well, I feel like this is my charitable deed, because I think that for a lot of the problems people have, being a bastard is like, art is the salvation, you know. And so what I'll do is I'll take in 3 bastards, two brothers, Romulus and Remus, and they're raised by a wolf. So, you know, I'm really going out of my way there. And the other, like I say, because I was mentioning a minute ago, is Leonardo da Vinci, but his ghost, the ghost of Leonardo da Vinci as a child. The reason why I think that there's it could be beneficial to have them in, despite them, you know, having this kind of proclivity for trouble, is that they tend to have a desire and a perfectionism, a determination that I don't see in people who've been raised in normal families. You know, I don't see that. And so I think that, say, with intellect being an osmosis, I think throwing that into the mix will be a positive thing for everyone involved. You know, you have the other ones who, you know, you can be in constant communication with the parents, and you have these where it's like, okay, because I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm stumbling over my words to try to think of like the psychology behind this. I think it's like maybe like a lack of affection at some point, a kind of a trauma. So you have a chip on your shoulder where you just think like, okay, I have to prove people wrong. I have to like do something. You have to, you know, like an inferiority complex. Yeah, I think that's what it is. But that's not really I mean, it's a bad thing to experience on an emotional level, but it's a positive thing for art to have that. You know, to be a perfectionist in art. It's like, well, I mean, it's also got its cons, but it's yeah, I think it's valuable. And also valuable for society, because as I was saying, it's like there are many problems that bastards can have in the society, and I think art is what mitigates them. Like if you're a bastard listening to this, then you know you're going to have to hone your foresight, because that's what will be lacking. You know that's something that you should work on your emotional control. That's some practical advice, and which men have a duty to do. But yeah, for art, it's like, you know, I could have easily been a serial killer. You know, if I didn't find art, that would have been the path that I would have taken. You know, it really is true, and you can figure out for yourself whether you think I'm joking or not. Honestly, if you did look at my upbringing and the events of my childhood, you should count your lucky stars. I'm just a poet and not a serial killer, because I take about 9 out of the 10 boxes. I so easily could have been a serial killer. I would have been good at it too. You know, some people can talk the talk. I could walk the walk. My numbers would be up there with the best, and I'd have fun with it too. I'd kill my victims in imaginative ways. I'd leave little clues for the investigators to find, but the trail I leave will be too labyrinthine and elaborate, so I'll never be found. Won't even leave a pube at a crime scene. If I do, it will belong to a geriatric just to throw off my scent. You know, everyone has a hidden talent, but you know, mine is that I know how to dissolve bones. So it's funny too, because if you like, people always assume obviously you are joking when you say shit like that, but it makes me think of what would happen if the internet was big, like fucking like 30 years ago during like Jeffrey Dahmer, and he had a podcast, you know, Jeffrey's Midnight Snacks, and he did episodes on the many uses of liquid nitrogen, reviewed butcher knives, and you'd be telling your friends, "Hey, I found this great new podcast. You should definitely check it out. He's got a quirky sense of humour, though." Yeah, and they tune in. He's just going,
Hey, any of you guys ever notice when you go to a gay bar and talk to a black man, they always end the night with a drill in their head?
I'm gonna drink your brain like it's chocolate milk.
Though I'm not great at introductions, while the pendulum swings slow, I will swallow my reluctance, and so here I go, here I go, here I go, here I go, here I go. What's your name? What's your number? Together we can conquer this rock. If I put 2 fucking fingers inside of your pussy and 2 in your eyes, they call it the Spock, I would have the whole wide world safe in my hands while the rough seas tremble below. We could live long and prosper, baby, with my fucking hello. And then your eyes will say, as it will be knowing you.
And now the time has come to listen to the madness of the masses. And if you'd ever like to contribute to this part of the podcast in future episodes, do send in your videos and your dick pics and your clip pics and your questions and, you know, whatever else, any statements you have, into Pabulum at gmail.com, and do follow me at Pab the Crab across all social media. So our first submission is from a chap who says, I listened to your last episode and I don't understand why America is the problem. Surely it's the globalists. And I think we should give Elon time. It is early days. Well, I should say, I apologise for the last episode. I don't want to blame my gay puss here, but it is completely his fault. It's all down to my gay cat, because I actually made a recording answering the Elon question, and as I said at the time, my cat stood on my laptop, so I went, okay, I'll just re-record it from scratch. And so I thought I had said a lot of things that I actually didn't say in the in the recording that got released. So there's a part where I said something about like, oh, the founding fathers will love me, which sounds, you know, fairly okay in a statement by itself. But the reason why I said that, for example, was I went on a huge rant about the American Constitution in the first take that I did, but that never got heard. So that's absolutely my bad. And, you know, upon some self-reflection, it's not entirely the fault of my feline friend. It is probably an element of selfishness within myself, and also I'm figuring out recording times, because, you know, I'm not too sure how long everything's going to take to edit and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I apologise for that, because it must have been confusing for people. Like, I think I began to answer the question and just made a lot of points. There might have been good points still, but very much like this episode as a whole, the whole like labyrinthine element. Sometimes I'll start something and then I actually don't end up rounding it off with what I intended to. But you make the point like, oh, surely it's the globalists, not America. It's like, yeah, it is the globalists. It's a global problem, you know. hence the globe. But and I should say also, I'm absolutely fine with being questioned on anything I ever say on the podcast. If I ever say anything on the podcast, challenge it absolutely, question it absolutely. You know, I'm not a monolith. I'll get things wrong. I'll have my own bad takes. Challenge them. You know, everyone will improve through that process. Just make sure, you know, you provide a reason and some logic to it. But absolutely, I've got no fear of that. I absolutely welcome questioning. But yeah, going back to the American thing. Well, what I missed out in the recording put out, I was talking about the American Constitution, because I think I was talking about how it's always conflated freedom of speech. And I think that what it comes down to is the American Constitution, or I don't know if it's the Constitution, maybe like the Bill of Rights, because they put the words freedom of press and freedom of speech in the same sentence. So it seems that that's what a lot of people attach together, just like instinctively, but they're actually different things, because, you know, one deals with the rights of an individual and the other's a collective thing. You see, we talked about China having a constitution that has freedom of speech within it, but that's made redundant by the inability to criticise the Chinese Communist Party. Well, I see in America now that their constitution is made redundant by their worship of business, because you see, they never see it as an individual. Like, they'll literally say, like, oh, they're a private business, so it's their right to be able to take away your freedom of speech. It's like, they've forgotten why the Constitution was written to begin with, you know, because that's just a loophole. Yeah, I mean, think of it like this: like, if your entire country becomes a shopping mall and you really love, like, and, you know, the First and Second Amendment, you really like go like, oh, that's what I really care about. But now you say the private businesses within your country have a right to poo-poo both of those rights, because that's their private right to do that. It's like, do you have those things anymore? Your entire country is just one big corporate shopping mall, so you don't. They've just found a loophole in it, and yeah, this is then a wider point with the globalists and all constitutions. We should pay attention to that, because it's like, it's not just that it has to be the individual that understands freedom of speech and abides to it. It has to be monarchs, it has to be politicians, and it has to also be corporations. So another element of freedom of speech, we can say, okay, let's abolish the nonsensical hate speech laws. Let's have freedom of speech enshrined in a codified constitution, as we must. And I say those are necessary steps, but it's like, if you have employers, you have companies, completely unelected, can then say to people like, oh, I'm not going to hire someone because of a tweet they made 10 years ago. It's like, and that's a huge part of like self-censorship. Whenever you find people and they're just eunuchs on the planet that are so scared to say anything, it's like, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you really expressing your opinion? It's like, because they don't want to lose their job, they don't want it to affect these guys. It's like they shouldn't have the power to do that, because then it's just a loophole that the tyrants will then use. And if it was a dictator saying all of this, saying like, oh, you're not allowed to say that, you're not allowed to say that, everyone would be up in arms about it. But it's like, they don't need to do that when they can just go like, hey, we'll just get the corporations. We'll just get the corporations to do it. And then you go deeper into all of like the corporation stuff. You go into like BlackRock, and they have like an ESG rating where they'll say corporations have to buy into like woke shit in order to get funding, in order to get investors. So it's like, then they have to kind of like toe the same part. Somebody's like, hey, who the fuck elected them? Who the fuck elected Larry Fink or any of the other plutocrats that are pushing all of that shit? And so again, when it comes to America's involvement in that, it's like, well, I've seen it before. So the issue is globalism, but it's like, it's the spinelessness of all of the other globalists on the globe. But it's like the situation still housed in America. Like, an example is like when Trump got kicked off Twitter, for example. That cannot be allowed. You can't just have like this body of power to go, hey, we're just going to get rid of a sitting president. Like, I know there's a lot of Twitter leak kind of things happening right now, and that's a big deal. That there's very specifically targeted political opponents and that kind of stuff, and sensitive in that way. But it's like, we already knew that. If you look at the whole like just banning Trump, that's enough for people should look at it and go, hey, that's not going to be acceptable, because that's interference with an election. That alone is an interference that so yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. But when that happened, when Trump got kicked off, I remember I was on an alternative social media platform called Gab. I'm still on Gab. I haven't been on it for a while. I do have to get back on all of that stuff to like promote and everything. Everyone's like, why are you on Gab? We want to start the insurrection. It's like, literally, I was just like sharing poetry, just having a little poetry community on Gab. But anyway, like, we got banned for like a week after Trump got kicked off, and maybe millions of Trump supporters got kicked off of Twitter. They had like go to alternative sites. So then they were like hosted on Amazon, I want to say at the time, who then, Jeff Bezos took the executive decision of saying, oh, well, they're not allowed to be housed on our web space anymore. So then everyone got kind of, the website got blocked. But you have to really think about that on two levels. One is that you have a foreign interference there with everyone in the world, because if it is a global thing, these social media sites. Why are we at the behest of one nation? And in that situation, it was American politics. But yeah, you'd have me talking to people in Korea and Africa and Poland and wherever else in the world that are now told, like, no, you can't do that. And also people are selling products on social media now. Again, also now their income's affected. And they're told, no, you can't do that. Why not? Oh, because we're trying to influence the American election. Like, you know what I mean? It's like we can't be at the behest to that. And actually, there was only one politician to put the spineless globalist puppets. And I'm not a fan of, Big Merky, Angela Merkel, but like she's got a lot of things I disagree with. But credit where credit's due. I said at the time, she's the only one I can think of that of like a major politician that said, "Hey, you can't do this. Like this fundamentally like usurps every democracy on the planet. You can't just have unelected people ban the world's politician. Like this is not okay. This does not set a good precedent for anyone, and it should be opposed." And there's another group too, which was I think it was Poland. I think Polish politicians passed a law, and this is what every country should really be doing, which is if a social media site bans one of Poland's citizens, the Polish government fines the social media site like €2 million or whatever for every person, and that's what should be happening. Everyone should be doing, and even better, every country should be having its own social media platforms. We shouldn't be dependent upon these just like one or two things, and they're all based upon, or based like Silicon Valley in America. It's like, why don't we have our own Silicon Valley? I know you wouldn't really have these issues, but like I say, it's a global issue. But I'm just saying very specifically with the sites of like the social media sites we use in Silicon Valley. Well, of course, it's American. Of course, that's what it's about. It's American politics, and yeah, I've witnessed that where we've been deprived of communication, and it's actually really perverse that to depriving us of communication, because it wasn't just a small thing. Like it's not as if it happened now. This was when the world was completely locked down, so it's really your only means of communication with a lot of the outside world. And like, oh no, you're not allowed to do that, so it's a much bigger thing, and on a wider level, again, Americans should deal with their loophole in the Constitution, because then it becomes wacky, where you have a lot of people who don't really understand freedom of speech, are kind of lecturing the rest of the planet on what freedom of speech is, and confusing a lot of people as to what freedom of speech is, when it's just the individual right. And there's also two things with that. Individual right, and why I really express that's what it is. And when someone tries to say, oh, what about freedom of prayer, what about like, it's always something different. But when it's the individual right, there's only two things that really only really two arguments that could be made why you wouldn't have freedom of speech for an individual citizen, and they're both really based on offence. But one of them is someone's offended, which is, as we've gone through before, not a good reason. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. All offence is ephemeral, and it's like there's a saying. Gandhi said that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, which sounds very poetic. It sounds like a very good quip, but actually, it's kind of a misunderstanding of the initial reasoning of an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye is not about retaliation. An eye for an eye is saying that the punishment must fit the crime. That's what an eye for an eye means, and it will never fit the crime. To imprison someone for their speech is not it will never be just. And it can be over anything. If it's about offence, then it's completely subjective, which in turn is a complete disaster. Like for as long as you have hate speech laws in a country, you don't have a justice system, because it's entirely based upon subjectivity, and you need law to be objective. So you literally have no judicial system, and So all the problems are, far-reaching. I'll try not to get too deep into the rabbit hole. I just want to make a point about Elon here, because they say, like, oh, okay, we're against offence. We'll be like, oh, just especially you've offended a crazy person. But then they'll still go along with the idea of incitement. That's the next one. But the incitement is a myth. And this is why I bring up the distinction between an individual right and different rights pertaining to the collective. Because really, if you think of anyone who they even make a claim has incited anything, who has the capacity to incite anything, I can only think of two things. One is the media, and another is politicians. And take a wild guess as to who the incitement laws don't apply to. You guessed it, it's the media and your politicians. It's only a law for the plebeian. It's just the civilians in society for what we say. And it's not possible. I mean, really put yourself in the shoes. And censorship in itself is a completely intrinsically psychopathic trait. Because the second you put yourself in the other person's shoes, you just put yourself on the other side of the argument. Then you go, oh yeah, we shouldn't have this infrastructure in place in case the other side get in power. We're fucked. That's your worst nightmare. So that's the whole point. It's a really like a universal principle. No one's really excluded from it. It's the most inclusive policy on the planet to have freedom of speech, and so you have this myth of incitement, because you really put yourself in this situation, and whatever you say that's completely fucked up, or if anyone says anything that's completely fucked up, are you ever gonna go, oh well, now I'm gonna riot? Fucking imagine thinking that's actually gonna happen. It's like, no, it never will happen. It never has happened. What happens if someone says something that's fucked up, and you can put these lies in an age of censorship, because if no one's saying it, then the boogeyman just gets bigger and bigger, and they go, oh, the sky's going to fall down if you say that, oh, this is going to happen if you say that. It's like, no, it won't. It actually won't. Most things you just say, and someone, if it's really fucked up, someone goes, oh, that's fucked up. or they'll go, is that guy on meds? Like that, they're the two biggest reactions you'll get. No one anywhere will ever go, oh, no, we've got to just start like beating people and riot. I mean, talked before about the agenda to make everybody atheist. The whole idea of incitement is only possible through atheism, because the main principle of atheism is that they don't believe in free will. Well, it's the same thing here. It's like you can only believe in incitement if you don't believe in free will. That's the only way you can possibly have that law, is through atheism, because it's a purely atheistic law. It takes away all personal accountability and all free will. I say it's not true, it's not possible, never happened, never will. But then you can just like glue separate events together. So if someone says something you don't like, they just glue a different event and go, oh, well, that caused that. And I'm not saying this from any kind of like agenda or bias or anything. I've read the incitement laws, and they literally have to put that into the law. They say in the law, don't have it with me, I'm just basically telling you the gist of it, but they say it doesn't matter if nothing happens. It doesn't matter if the words you said don't actually incite anything, because they won't. It's just that we have the fear that it might, or that something might have happened, a completely separate event in a separate location, a separate place of time, and then that can be put back to you because of incitement. So it's nonsense. It's an absolute myth. So this, coming back to Elon, you can have the stance that you're against this kind of nonsensical offence, like, oh, you're offended by words, whatever. But what incitement is basically, oh, you've offended Voldemort. That's what it actually comes down to. You've offended Voldemort, so now we'll just glue a separate event together and go, oh, that's incitement. It's like, it's not. You've just offended Voldemort. And I say the motives of Elon, I think, taking over is very ego-driven. So you can still get the pat on the back from a lot of people who claim to be pro-free speech. Again, what I've seen on Twitter, particularly like conservative right-wing Americans, they'll like pat them on the back still and go like, oh yeah, it's pro-free speech. because they kind of like draw the line. They go, well, everyone agrees it's not inside. It's like, no, I disagree completely. 100% it's a myth, and it's just based upon offence. So like I say, he's not pro free speech. He's pro less censorship, which is cool. But I think I stand by that, and that's where the relationship of America comes in. I hope I addressed that effectively the first time, but God only knows. But I will say, as well, with giving Elon time, it's like even the time of day, you've got to really put yourself in the shoes for that, because I mean, if you're running that many businesses, it must be a hard thing. But I do feel like I've seen enough right now that I'm not going to hold out much hope. As I think a lot of it's ego driven. You can still get the pat on the back by just getting rid of the nonsensical censorship and then kowtowing to Voldemort under the guise of incitement. So you can have I mean, as I say, I stand by what I said. I think he's not no one's saviour. However, absolutely an improvement. I saw today that there's going to be a thing where you can see if you're shadow banned. Because in the last administration of Twitter, I got shadow banned, no fucking clue. It could be 1,000 different things. But with Elon, he says you can look to see if you're shadow banned and then also make an appeal, which is a very important thing. Like, if you are going to be censored on one of these sites, it's like it is a much better thing. You can make an appeal at least. But I mean, a much better thing would also be to just stop shadow banning altogether. Another thing that I asked this week was how could we reform the education system? And I'm so pleased with the amount of responses. We got maybe 20 responses this week, which is, I know in the grand scheme of things, not a lot for as far as podcasts and YouTube go and everything, but that was just incredible, like the amount of engagement with it. And actually, we can't answer everyone's, but I'll go through most of them, and a lot of them are kind of the same thing as we'll get to. But I just want to say a big thank you to, and all the time, anyone who listens, all my kings and queens in this kingdom. It's an absolute pleasure. It's quickly becoming one of my favourite parts of the week, just engaging with y'all. So we had a few answers to the question of how can we reform the education system. The first queen that responded was have less LGBT plus teachers teaching gender diversity to kids. Well, I mean, the thing is, this also could be an American thing. As there was a point with Americanization, because I do see this a lot on social media. They'll push things and they'll say like, "Oh, look how fucked up this is." They're teaching like sex to kids, and it is fucked up. There's like sex in the books, and like drag queen story hour and everything. But it wasn't a thing when I was in school. The thing in England and maybe across Europe, I'm willing to bet, it was more like, I spoke before about miscegenation, so race mixing. I don't have anything like fundamentally against race. I've been in interracial relationships myself, across all continents. But it's an agenda, and that's what becomes bizarre. It's same for TV too. Like, you see, it's a real agenda that's happening, and I think I went into this before. It's the politicization, the activism within our textbooks, and so again, I can't say whether it's happening in my country or it's just an American thing. Like I say, I have seen it through Hollywood and TV stuff, which is another thing when it comes down to Americanization that people should be wary of. It's like, why don't we have our own Hollywood? Why don't we have our own Hollywood? If we're like, hey, there's a foreign country that's like subverting our youth with this kind of propaganda, why don't we have our own Hollywood? And that's something that we absolutely should be aspiring towards. And yes, I'm against the activism. The activism's got to go all the way through academia, across all things. And so this would definitely fall into that. But what I would also say is that I have a lot of sympathy for people who have been thrown into that alphabet group. So a lot of them against their will, and even the ones who are going along with it. It's like it's the dangers of the game of collectivism, because now you say like, oh, you're all a part of that group. Well, one fucking lunatic from that group does something, it now tarnishes the reputation of your entire group. And that is really the danger of it. And I'll also say someone who takes like pride in something that's really like an immutable element of their personality is the first refuge of someone that's done nothing to be proud of in their own personal life. It's like it should be a secondary characteristic, whatever it is you are, and I think that's the reality, that you have a lot of people who are a part of that group that just wouldn't go along with any of that shit. I'm willing to bet that if you interview like 100 gay men and you said like, hey, what do you think about drag queen story hour, at least 99 of them are gonna go, yeah, it's fucking nonsense, but now their whole reputation and they can just be like thrown into this whole thing of like, look how they're like groomers and they're pedophiles and all that kind of stuff, which I don't think is true. However, I agree with you. I don't know how much is happening, and again, I could be wrong about all of this. I could be wrong about that it's not happening in my country. I just don't know, because I've not seen. I'm not been to school for over a good decade or so. So I've got no idea. It might be in my school too now, but yeah, I guess we agreed that the activism across the board has to go. Another person sent in less school hours. I don't know what the motivations behind this suggestion is, but I make the assumption that it's probably like, okay, school's so boring. It's so boring, have less hours. But again, I think this is intrinsically linked to the amount of hours that adults work their jobs. You want to have less hours for schools, then you need to have parents work less hours in their jobs. Those two things I think are linked, but also I don't think it has a significant impact if you're like, oh well, you want less hours because you think it's going to somehow make kids more like chill and learn more. I don't think it's the case, because I've been to a school less hours than most, which is when I went to the Jewish school. Not only did we finish like an hour earlier than other schools on like Shabbat, but on Shabbat we'd finish like half day on a Friday, and all these like Jewish festivals like Yom Kippur and that kind of stuff we'd have off. So yeah, I mean, I've experienced less hours in a school, and I don't think that's the significant factor at play here. I think the hours are pretty okay. I think the determinative factor I find with schools is the sizes of the classes and the ideology of the parents of the pupils in the school in regards to education. That's another significant difference I found. But yeah, thanks for writing in, as always. Give them space to be creative, not just make them learn everything like parrots. This is the most popular message. People word in different ways. Critical thinking. People need to think for themselves. Everyone's just a robot. And absolutely, we'll get into that in the coming episodes. I did make this a bit of a dangerous segment, this one, because I said send in your suggestions, but it's a very real chance someone could send in a suggestion that's way better than anything that I have planned, and it just completely throws everything out. But thankfully everything's still on course. But yeah, I'll go a little bit more into critical thinking in the coming episodes, but absolutely, and it is encouraging just for humanity that's the most popular thing said. Make school less boring. Have passionate teachers only. People who really care about the kids. 100% couldn't agree more with that one. And this is I love all of the submissions, but this has got to be one of my favourite ones. Because it says, adopt an ancient Afro or Druidic / Hyperborean spiritual system. And it threw me off completely. Because I assume when Afro, it's meant African. But it really throws me off because it's written with a PH. And I just love the blend of people we're starting to have on this podcast. This is exactly what I want. This is true diversity. This is diversity of thought, of having people who would just never be in the same room together, and you're all here now. You know, everyone's here. We're here for a good time. Welcome to the party. I don't know much about the African element of that, though. You know, so I mean, you could definitely educate us all on that sometime, assuming that is what is being said. I did watch some videos in the past on like ancient African cultures, and it wasn't like Afrocentrist, because you have a lot of things where like Shakespeare was African, and like, you know, it's just nonsense. But you have like real, I think it's the Mali Empire, I want to say, that kind of stuff. So I enjoyed watching that. Those styles, like if I knew the channel name, I'd recommend it. But it's it was always funny too, because I'll go into the comments and like, oh yeah, it's like the White Devil. There's like quite a lot of like black supremacist shit. I just thought it was funny. But yeah, like I don't know a lot about ancient African cultures, and you know, we obviously call each other kings and queens here. We've appropriated this this pronoun, and but you know, it's like, I actually believe it, that every single culture, every single race, every single people on the planet have once had a great civilization. You know, I know people wouldn't expect that from me, from some of the things that I say, but I absolutely don't believe the mainstream narrative of history. And you have a lot of things coming out now with like Graham Hancock's got a show on Netflix, for example. Graham Hancock's a funny guy. So I do love Graham Hancock, but he says like he goes like, mother cannabis. He goes, yeah, mother, it's a sacred mother cannabis. It's like, what? You mean weed? You know, you're talking about weed? The matriarch of Marjoram. Like, but he has a show, he talks a lot about like the Younger Dryas period, for example. But I'm a little bit further, because it seems a lot of people are looking for one lost civilization. So when you bring up, you know, Druidic, Hyperborean, that kind of thing, that might be in the realm of like what was our lost cultures 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. I'm of the opinion that we've had civilizations that have rose and fell time and time and time again, and we should really be looking for a lot of those things, or you know, 30,000 years ago. You know, that's a time we should be looking, because a lot of the evidence we have is completely fragmentary for a lot of our things. Like, we've all had our like ancestral homelands destroyed, which is a taboo thing for European people to talk about. But and we'll get to that as well in the future, in the coming episodes. So do stay tuned. Stay tuned for you know, that bit of gnosis. But yeah, I think that everything's in fragment. For example, let's talk about Hyperborea. I talked about Hyperborea in a poem recently, and it was because there was some speculation from Greeks that it was Britain could have been Hyperborea, but I think the most likely candidate people speak of is Scandinavia. I'd probably go along more with that, and I think that under the Scandinavian Renaissance, they viewed themselves as Hyperboreans during that time. With Druids, I can speak more to. We spoke about Anglesey in episode 1, and that was where the last Druids were killed. Actually, it's funny how things come full circle. Yeah, with the Druids. But again, it's fragmentary, the evidence that we have for all of these kind of lost civilizations, because what people know of the Druids comes from Romans, But again, that's propaganda from the Romans, and even when someone appears in these places in ancient times and they then report on them, that's just one snapshot in that civilization's timeline. So the idea we go like, oh well, that's everything they believe and this is what our ancestors did, it's like, no. Not only is that one snapshot, it's the fall of that civilization also. That's something we have to take into consideration. So when for both things, because imagine if you went to say China, Maoist China, and people are eating each other through cannibalism because they're starving, and the only record you have of the Chinese people is that they're now cannibals. It's like, well, we know that Chinese people are not cannibals, but if that was the only snapshot you had, then that's what would be recorded, especially from the people who've invaded those places and have good reason to propagate those ideas. So you see this around the world where they'll go like, oh, they were doing human sacrifice, they were doing that. It's like, at what time was this happening? At what time was that happening? If they claimed they were a cannibal, they claimed they were doing all these wacky things. It's like, that's not the apex of these ancient civilizations. It's the decline of those civilizations. It's the collapse of those civilizations. So to make the assumption that it was always that way would be wrong from the viewpoint of every culture preceding our own. It is somehow primitive. But I say I urge caution for the other way too, because I see people do the same thing with Britain. They'll say things like, oh yeah, like Boudica, and they'll cover them in tattoos. The Pruttani, they'll cover them in tattoos. It's like, yeah, at the end of the civilization, you have like a warrior queen and everyone's covered in tattoos. It doesn't remind you of, I don't know, modern society. It does remind you that maybe this is just a symptom of civilizational collapse, because that's what happened. And it's the same, you'll see it all over the world. You'll see that where they'll go, like the Native Americans, which another thing I would love to read more about, like African stuff. But they'll go there were a matriarchy, all these like tribes that got invaded by, like, say, conquistadors or whatever. They were all matriarchies. It's like, yeah, they were a matriarchy when they were invaded. Doesn't mean at the height of those places that was the case. It's just literally one snapshot in time, and it was the end of the civilization. So I say we've got to be very cautious about our ancestral cultures when you only have fragments. And I say people want to look at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years into our past, which they should do, and we will find a lot of interesting things there. I say I'm of the opinion we've been on the planet for far longer than anyone is willing to accept in current times. And there'll be some threads, where you can, because also it exists, the evidence for like much more ancient societies. We can go 30,000 years back. We have evidence for it, and then you see the links between all of those societies. And as I will get to it in the next episode, I think these common threads, and I think that is what's being said there. Revive our own ancestral cultures, have respect and honor for those things, and be more spiritual, and that's all absolutely coming. And as I spoke before with the kind of globalist monoculture that's being pushed, it's like it's no one's actual culture. You know what I mean? It's like it's a dilution of people's culture. Where everyone's kind of like pushed along. So like if you're Italian, they'll go like, oh, you're like the 12th best meal from your, because that's what it becomes. Like, oh, you're Italian, you do pizza. You're Irish, you do Guinness. You're English, fish and chips. Like, that's now your exports around the world instead of like a real cultural exchange. You know what I mean? Like, if you're Italian, give us Giordano Bruno. You know what I mean? If you're you're Irish, give us Yeats. let's have better import and exports around these things, and yeah, there'd be a much greater, actual cultural enrichment, I think, if we did all of that. And the final one we got in terms of answering this question was more poetry, and this is written by a poet. And I say I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but I end up disagreeing with it in the coming episodes, because I fundamentally agree, and I also disagree. Because the way it's being taught, I'd rather it not be taught at all. I think that it's not beneficial for any poet for it to be taught as it's being taught. But if you were to say, okay, let's teach and the entire canon, 100% more poetry. I think you obviously know that about me. I think that if you reintroduce the entire Western canon, the classical canon, and you have all of the world poetry, and you even keep the ones that are around, and again, just to echo what I just said a moment ago, then you'd also have much more of a richer cultural exchange. If you had to read about Eminescu of Romania, like Goethe in Germany, or like Lipo of China, who had Valmiki and Vyasa of India, Rabindranath Tagore, you had Sun Thornpu of Thailand, go around all these places with the different poets, and that was our true understanding. It's there would be less racism in our society as a result of that, because you wouldn't be able to propagate any idea of inferiority with anyone, because you would have already been shown the geniuses of each part of the world, because they exist through the poetry of those places. So I'd be absolutely for that if it was more poetry, but we have a situation in my country now where it's basically, I say I'll get into all of this in the next episodes, but it's basically the year 1900 onwards plus Shakespeare for now. For now, it's the Shakespeare. When it's where the fuck did everything in between that go? And it's all based upon corruption, incestuousness, a lot of nepotism, a lot of wackiness, and poets are not confrontational people. We're very sensitive minds, and so we don't ever really want to point the finger. But we have a hashtag that we use on Instagram where we'll say #poetry is not dead. #poetry is not dead. Why would we have to use the hashtag? Oh, because people think that it's dead. So who's responsible? And that's the thing, is people have to have the bravery to point the finger and say, well, someone must be responsible for that perception. And it comes down to, again, the activism within academia, the activism within school. They have this ideology that they push and go, oh, we're going to just push this, progressive modernist approach, and it's the public has not bought into it. They don't like it. And I'm not one to kind of bitch about individual poets. I wouldn't call anyone out by name or anything like that, because I think it's better to kind of uplift each other. I think that all I think kind of comes from a remnant of maybe Pope, which I do like. Alexander Pope and Byron was inspired by Pope, and they have a lot of kind of good roast poems where just start ripping on people. But the thing you have to take into consideration is Alexander Pope was 4'7". He's a bit of a manlet, so you got to take that into consideration. Whereas when poets are kind of bitching about each other all the time, I don't think it's good look. I think we can be more noble. I think it's a vaginal thing to do. So I wouldn't call people out individually, but it's something that I think about. I think that people have to have the bravery. I mean, I could be blacklisted from everything, but it's that would be the righteous thing to do. To point out the corruption, to point out the nepotism, within the publishers, within academia, because it's not good for poets going forward for the next 100, 200, 300 years. It's not going to be a I think, in fact, there's no other way. In fact, there's no other way. You have to go against it 100% because, it's just it's not good. So I fully agree with. I don't see the fortune cookie poets. All that stuff, as I call it. I think that a lot of publishers are considered to be taxidermists, where they'll shit on the dead poets. They'll snivel at the forms. They'll try and just rewrite our history and our culture, and yet they make all the money from those things. And this is what happens with the anthologies: is you'll have poets and the publishers of those poets pay to be in the anthologies because they can't sell any copies. And it's funny because you can go to the Amazon site of those poets and you can see a lot of like 1-star reviews from kids that are like, I was forced to buy this GCSE for my GCSEs, like, and that's what it's kind of about. It's not. I say more poetry, but we have to bring back the meritocracy. With the last one we have is another video that was sent in. My king, how do these dance moves compare to last week's? And he sent in a little video.
Пароход, полный ход давай, пароход, не запаздывай. Печка стелится, конь телится, еду я домой, братва аж не верится.
I think it's fucking phenomenal. I think I'd like to see a dance troupe with this thing, I Guy and Master Roshi. See what kind of maneuvers they can perform. Match the Macarena in terms of virality. What was he on the Gangnam style? Can throw him in. It's just incredible. And actually, it blows me away about this is it's just the technology nowadays, because I'm an absolute Luddite, and if I knew how to do this wouldn't be a picture show podcast anymore. I'd turn up as a tadpole each week, But yeah, thanks a lot for this submission. I love it. I don't know. It's become like a dance podcast for that. But yeah, thanks. So now it's time to say goodbye. I hope you've enjoyed it. I did warn you it was going to be a very labyrinthine episode. I hope I managed to express everything that I came to. But this is going to be a series, as I alluded to before. So the next 3 episodes, I'm planning on making it primary, secondary, tertiary education with our academy that we have founded in this episode. So do stick with it and see what kind of things we manage to produce. As I've been saying for a while, that I would like to end the podcast with an independent musician, and do still send in your own music to Pabulum at gmail.com. Someone who's a musician, but just make sure that I can't deal with any sign shit. It's got to be independent for copyright stuff. But I've been saying this for a while. I'd like that. So I'm delighted to say that we're going to end this episode with our first independent musician. And he's a friend of mine, a friend of the podcast, Johnny Taylor, and I don't have enough nice things to say about this maestro. If you'd like to follow him, he's at Johnny Taylor Official, I believe, on social media, and the song is In the Sky. Like, share, subscribe to the podcast, fucking yank on that bell end thing. We are the algorithm. Educate yourself, buy a fucking book, and know that the time for peace is upon us.